Good morning, happy Monday, and welcome to the Monday Morning Pep Talk. In this week's installment, we're going to dig into I Can't Stand My Boss. Over the course of my 30-year career, I've had the opportunity to work with some very compassionate, supportive, and inspiring people. And at the same time, I've worked with people who were downright aggressive, discouraging, and at times just mean. I worked in not one, but two different jobs where I saw physical aggression in very senior leadership. That included throwing and breaking of phones and computers, loudly cursing and berating employees, and even one boss who threw a chair across the room. I've also worked with leaders who created a psychologically unsafe environment, places where I was regularly judged without support, encouraged to do things that did not align with my values, and unable to freely communicate how I was feeling without fear of retaliation or recourse, and many different flavors of bosses and managers in between. So let's dig into the problem here. In most cases, in a boss and employee relationship, there's expectations for each party. As an employee, you hopefully know what is expected of you. What are your working hours? What are your responsibilities? What are your goals? And the same goes for your boss and manager. You hopefully have an understanding of what you can expect from them, how and when they will support you, what resources they can and will provide you with, how and when they will give you feedback, and what their goals are. And in addition to these individuals' expectations, hopefully at an organizational level, there's a set of values that governs the way employees interact with one another and how the company interacts with the world. We often hear values like integrity, respect, accountability, equity, and the list goes on. These two are expectations for both you and your boss. Are you demonstrating these values at work? Are you demonstrating integrity? Are you showing respect? Are you acting equitably? Now, these values are typically a good indicator of how the employees are expected to be, but often the values published are not the values lived within the organization. So the two biggest problems I see here are number one, these values and expectations are poorly defined or they're not a reflection of reality. If they're poorly defined, they can be more clearly stated. If they're not a reflection of reality, the problems may run deeper. Either way, the first thing you need to understand is if your boss and your values and expectations are clear. Problem number two is communication. Often, even if the expectations are clearly defined, we do not feel empowered or comfortable to communicate fully and fearlessly when those expectations are not being met or if we find ourselves in need of help. So, how can we positively and productively reframe this? The first thing, and often the hardest thing to do, is to ask yourself, what is going on with my boss that they're acting this way? Often there are invisible forces adversely impacting them. Maybe they're being treated poorly or pressured by their management. Maybe they have something going on at home that is affecting them at work. Being curious about what is going on for them can help you approach these situations with more compassion and with more of a focus on finding a deeper connection with them. Secondly, you can ask yourself, are everyone's expectations clearly defined? And are we both communicating where expectations are not being met? At one point in my career, I worked for a manager whose primary tactics were berating and judging employees as a form of motivation. They'd say things like, "You're a slacker, you look like a slob, that person is better than you, quit your bitching and work harder," and the list goes on. So one day, long after I should have spoken up, I ended up communicating with them how I was feeling. I said I was not comfortable working for them. I said I needed positive and constructive support. I told them that I had met and interacted with other managers who valued me and were willing to support me in a more positive and constructive way. And they apologized, I think, and candidly shared that that was just the way they were. And for the most part, it worked for a lot of people. I knew several people who loved working for them. It just wasn't working for me. So I shared with them that I was going to look for other opportunities with managers that were more alignment with my values and my way of working. They totally understood and committed to supporting me in that transition. And before long, I was able to form a great relationship with a new manager that gave me a tremendous amount of autonomy and responsibility, but at the same time gave me much more compassionate support. So if you're struggling with a difficult boss right now, here are a few things to try this week. First, start with some compassion. Be curious about what's going on for them. Maybe even ask them what challenges they're facing and if there's any support that they are needing. Next, do a little diagnosis of everyone's values and expectations. Are they clearly defined in the first place? Are the values being lived? Are the expectations actually being met? And finally, wherever you find values or expectations that are not in alignment, ask yourself, have I communicated these situations to my manager and asked for help in reconciling them? In practice, this looks like objectively saying, I understand these are the values and expectations that exist. Here is where I am seeing them not in alignment, and I wanted to get your help in addressing them. For example, if you're being expected to do more work than your job originally stated, share all the things that you're working on and identify that you don't have the time and the resources to do all of these things and that you'd like help prioritizing, delegating, or deferring some things. Or if they're engaging with you in a way that is making you uncomfortable, share with them what you have observed that is making you uncomfortable and ask them if they'd be willing to talk about addressing it. The caveat here is always if you're facing harassment, prejudice, aggression, or similar behaviors that make you feel unsafe, seek support from human resources or another trusted party. And you may take all of these steps and ultimately find an unwillingness to admit or address any of these individual or organizational issues. And at that point, it's time to find a place that has a culture and people that are truly in alignment with and in support of you, your values, your goals, and your hopes for the future. We know that this is some of the hardest work that you will ever do, so please let us know how it goes and if there's anything we can do to support you. As always, thank you for your time and attention this morning. Remember, I love you, I believe in you, and I am here for you. Take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you again next week.